A wild Mustang keeps stealing foals from neighboring ranches, disappearing with them into the untamed wilderness one by one. At first, local ranchers are outraged. How could a feral horse be so bold and strategic? But when a determined ranch owner finally tracks the Mustang on a moonlit night, what he discovers is so profound it changes everything. The truth behind the horse's actions reveals a heart-wrenching secret that no one could have imagined, and exposes a threat that puts the entire herd at risk. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Before we dive into this incredible story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today, and if you love stories about the incredible bonds between animals, don't forget to hit subscribe. Jake Mitchell wiped the sweat from his brow as he dismounted his quarter horse, Storm, after another exhausting day of searching the vast Montana wilderness. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, casting long shadows across his family's sprawling Pine Creek ranch. 3 weeks of missing foals from neighboring properties, and now his own ranch had been hit. As a third-generation rancher and expert horse trainer, he couldn't make sense of it. "Another dead end," he muttered to Storm, who nickered softly in response. Jake's weathered hands ran through his graying hair as he led his horse to the stable. 20 years of ranching experience hadn't prepared him for anything like this. A wild Mustang, striking with almost supernatural precision, somehow managing to lead away young foals without leaving any signs of struggle. Inside the stable, the remaining horses shifted nervously in their stalls. Ever since the first disappearance, there had been an undercurrent of tension among the animals. Jake's prized mare, Duchess, still mourned her missing foal, occasionally, calling out into the night with haunting whinnies that made his heart ache. As Jake settled Storm into his stall, movement caught his eye through the barn's dusty window. There, illuminated by the last rays of sunlight, stood the most magnificent Mustang he'd ever seen. The stallion's coal-black coat gleamed like polished obsidian, his muscular frame speaking to years of survival in the wild. But it was the horse's eyes that held Jake transfixed. They seemed to burn with an almost human intelligence. The Mustang stood perfectly still, watching the stable with an intensity that sent chills down Jake's spine. This had to be him, the phantom horse that had been plaguing the valley's ranches. But something about the way the stallion carried himself, the careful way he surveyed the property, suggested this was more than simple wild horse behavior. Before Jake could move, the Mustang's head snapped toward the horizon. With fluid grace, the wild horse melted into the gathering darkness, leaving Jake with more questions than answers. He quickly pulled out his phone, dialing the number of his closest neighbor and fellow rancher, Sarah Thompson. "Sarah, yeah, I just saw him. The black Mustang everyone's been talking about." Jake's voice was tight with tension. "He was watching my stable, just like you described at your place before your paint filly disappeared." Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker. "That's the 4th foal in 3 weeks, Jake. The Ranger Service says they've never seen anything like it. Wild horses don't typically approach ranch properties, let alone repeatedly steal young horses." Jake ran a hand along his jaw, feeling the rough stubble there. "Something's not right about this, Sarah. The way he moves, the way he watches. It's like he's planning something." "Be careful, Jake," Sarah warned. "Tom Rogers tried to chase him off last week when he caught him near his paddock." said that Mustang stood his ground, wouldn't back down even when Tom fired warning shots. There's something different about this one. After hanging up, Jake spent the next hour reinforcing the stable's security. He double-checked every latch, every gate, knowing in his gut it probably wouldn't make a difference. This Mustang had already proven himself capable of outsmarting their best security measures. As darkness settled over the ranch, Jake couldn't shake the memory of those intelligent eyes. He'd worked with horses his entire life, but he'd never seen anything like the awareness he'd witnessed in that wild stallion's gaze. There was purpose there, determination, and something else he couldn't quite name. Instead of heading back to his ranch house, Jake decided to set up watch in the stable's loft. He grabbed his rifle, a thermos of coffee, and settled in for a long night. The soft sounds of horses below provided a familiar comfort as he positioned himself near the window, eyes scanning the moonlit pasture beyond. Hours passed, marked only by the gentle creaking of the old barn and the occasional snort from the horses below. Jake was just starting to doubt his instincts when a shadow darker than the night itself moved at the edge of his property. The black Mustang emerged from the tree line like a spirit, his movements deliberately slow and cautious. Jake held his breath, watching through his binoculars as the wild horse approached the paddock where the younger horses were kept. But instead of heading straight for the foals, the Mustang did something unexpected. He began systematically checking the perimeter, almost like he was looking for something specific. Jake's hand tightened on his rifle, but something held him back from raising it. The Mustang's behavior was too deliberate, too calculated. This wasn't a simple case of a wild horse stealing domesticated ones. This was something else entirely. The black stallion spent nearly 20 minutes circling the property, his attention focused not just on the horses, but on the surrounding wilderness as well. Several times he stopped, head raised high, nostrils flaring as he tested the wind. It was almost as if he was standing guard. Suddenly, the Mustang's entire demeanor changed. His head snapped toward the northern tree line, ears pinned back, muscles tensing. Jake swung his binoculars in that direction, but could see nothing in the darkness. The wild horse let out a low, rumbling sound, not quite a whinny, but more like a warning. Without warning, the Mustang burst into action. He raced to the paddock gate with purpose, and what happened next left Jake questioning everything he thought he knew about horses. Using his teeth with almost human precision, the wild stallion manipulated the latch mechanism. The gate swung open with a quiet creak. Jake's finger moved to the rifle's trigger, but again he hesitated. The Mustang wasn't acting aggressively. Instead, he moved with an urgency that spoke of something else, something that made Jake's instincts as a rancher scream that there was more to this story. The black stallion approached a young Palomino filly, one of Jake's newest additions. Instead of forcing her to move, the Mustang seemed to communicate with her through subtle movements and soft nickering sounds. To Jake's amazement, the filly responded, following the wild horse without resistance. As they reached the tree line, Jake finally saw what had caught the Mustang's attention earlier. Multiple sets of yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness. Wolves, and from the number of reflections, it was a large pack. The pieces suddenly started falling into place in Jake's mind, but before he could fully process the implications, the night erupted into chaos. The wolf pack burst from the trees, their gray forms like smoke in the moonlight. But instead of finding easy prey in the form of isolated foals, they found themselves facing the black Mustang. The wild horse placed himself between the wolves, and the filly, his powerful frame radiating challenge. Jake raised his rifle, preparing to fire warning shots, but what he witnessed next would stay with him forever. The Mustang fought with an intelligence and strategy he'd never seen in a horse before. He didn't just react to the wolves' attacks, he anticipated them, using his powerful hooves and bulk not just to defend, but to actively drive the predators back. The filly, instead of panicking, seemed to understand her role. She moved when the Mustang guided her to move, stayed still when he positioned himself to protect her. It was like watching a carefully choreographed dance, but one where the stakes were life and death. The wolf pack, frustrated by the Mustang's fierce defense, eventually retreated into the darkness. The black stallion watched them go, his sides heaving with exertion, but his posture still proud and alert. Then, with gentle urgency, he guided the filly deeper into the wilderness, away from the direction the wolves had taken. Jake lowered his rifle, his mind racing. The missing foals, the Mustang's strategic behavior, the wolves, it all pointed to something extraordinary. This wasn't theft. This was rescue. The wild horse wasn't stealing foals for himself. He was protecting them from a threat that the ranchers hadn't even noticed was growing. With trembling hands, Jake pulled out his phone and dialed the local ranger service. "This is Jake Mitchell at Pine Creek Ranch," he said as soon as the line connected. "I need to report increased wolfpack activity in the area and I think I've figured out why we've been losing foals. You're not going to believe this, but we've got it all wrong. That wild Mustang everyone's been trying to hunt down, he's not the threat. He's been trying to save them." The next morning, the ranch buzzed with activity as rangers, local law enforcement, and neighboring ranchers gathered at Pine Creek Ranch. Jake stood on his front porch, exhausted from his sleepless night, but energized by the urgency of the situation. Sarah Thompson arrived in her dusty pickup truck, her face etched with concern as she approached. "Show me exactly where you saw them," Sarah said, following Jake to the stable. The morning sun illuminated the tracks left behind from the previous night's encounter. Wolf prints scattered around the paddock, evidence that validated Jake's incredible story. "The wolf pack's getting bolder," announced Ranger Mark Collins, crouching to examine the prints. His weathered face turned grave as he measured the depth and size of the impressions. "These are from a large pack, probably pushed down from the mountains by the drought. They're desperate for food. Preparing." And narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jake described the Black Mustang's strategic behavior, his voice filled with admiration. "He's been watching our ranches, identifying which foals are most vulnerable. That's why he took Sarah's paint filly first. She was closest to the tree line, easiest for predators to target." "A wild horse protecting domesticated foals?" Tom Rogers scoffed, adjusting his well-worn cowboy hat. "Sounds like something from a children's book." "I saw it with my own eyes, Tom," Jake insisted, pointing to the precisely unlatched gate. "He didn't break it open. He figured out the mechanism. This horse, he's different, special." Ranger Collins stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "Actually, this isn't completely unprecedented. There have been documented cases of wild horses adopting and protecting vulnerable members of other herds, but this level of strategic thinking—" He shook his head in amazement. Sarah, who'd been quietly examining the tracks, spoke up. "The real question is, where's he taking them? These foals have to be somewhere." Jake had been wondering the same thing. The Mustang couldn't have led them far. Young horses wouldn't. Be able to travel long distances, especially through rough terrain. I think I might know, he said, moving to the large topographical map mounted on his stable wall. See this area here? There's a hidden valley about 5 miles into the wilderness. It's got everything a herd would need: water, shelter, natural barriers against predators. The old Carter Valley. Ranger Collins nodded thoughtfully. It's been off most maps since the landslide blocked the main access road 15 years ago. But a horse could still get through the back passages. Jake grabbed his saddle, already moving toward Storm's stall. We need to find them before the wolf pack does. That Mustang can't protect all of them forever. Sarah stepped forward, determination glinting in her eyes. I'm coming with you. That's my paint filly out there. Ranger Collins made a quick call for backup before joining them. We'll need a small team. Too many people will spook them. Jake, you lead since Storm's familiar with the territory. Sarah, you and I will flank. The rest of you, he addressed the gathered ranchers, stay alert and report any wolf sightings immediately. As they rode out, the morning mist still clung to the valley floor, creating an ethereal landscape. Jake led them along game trails he'd known since childhood, but rarely used since the landslide cut off access to Carter Valley. Storm moved confidently beneath him, sensing his rider's urgency. 3 hours into their trek, they found the first sign, fresh hoof prints leading through a narrow mountain pass. He's smart, Jake observed, pointing to how the tracks hugged the rocky terrain. He's keeping them where the wolves would have trouble attacking from multiple angles. Sarah's voice carried a mix of worry and hope. They're alive out here. They have to be. As they emerged from the pass, the hidden valley spread out before them, a pristine sanctuary untouched by human development. A crystal-clear stream cut through meadows of waist-high grass, and natural rock formations provided perfect lookout points. There, Sarah whispered, pointing to movement near a cluster of aspens. Through their binoculars, they could see several foals grazing peacefully, including Sarah's paint filly. They looked healthy, well-fed, and remarkably calm for horses that had been living wild, and watching over them, standing like a sentinel on a rocky outcrop, was the black Mustang. Even from a distance, his presence commanded respect. As they watched, a younger foal strayed too far from the group. The Mustang immediately responded, gently herding it back to safety with movements that spoke of patience and intelligence. Incredible, Ranger Collins breathed. He's created a nursery of sorts, a safe haven. But their amazement was short-lived. A haunting howl echoed across the valley, followed by another, then another. The wolf pack had followed them. The change in the Mustang was immediate. He let out a sharp warning call, and the foals instantly gathered together, moving as one unit toward a more defensible position. The wild horse's strategy was clear. He'd chosen this location carefully, using the natural terrain to his advantage. "We have to help him," Jake said, already reaching for his rifle, but before they could act, something unexpected happened. More horses emerged from the tree line, other wild Mustangs, coming to the black stallion's aid. They moved with military precision, forming a protective circle around the foals. The black Mustang had not only rescued the vulnerable young horses, he'd built an army to protect them. The wolf pack appeared at the valley's edge, but now they faced not one defender, but an organized herd. The black Mustang led the defense, coordinating with his fellow horses through subtle movements and sounds that demonstrated years of developed communication. What followed was a display of nature's raw power and intelligence that left the humans In awe, the Mustangs worked as a unit, using their superior numbers and the terrain to their advantage. When wolves tried to circle around, they found their path blocked by vigilant horses. When they tested the defense directly, they were met with synchronized resistance. They're not just protecting the foals, Sarah realized, her voice filled with wonder. They're teaching them. Look! She was right. The older horses were demonstrating survival strategies to the young ones. How to read danger signals, how to move as a group, how to use the landscape for protection. The Black Mustang was not just saving them. He was preparing them for a life of freedom. Jake watched the magnificent wild horse coordinate this defense, and something profound struck him. "We've been thinking about this all wrong," he said softly. "We see fences and property lines, domestic versus wild. But he sees something bigger, a responsibility to protect the vulnerable, regardless of where they came from." The wolf pack, realizing they were outmatched, retreated into the wilderness. But the lesson they'd witnessed wouldn't soon be forgotten. Ranger Collins lowered his binoculars, his expression thoughtful. "So, what do we do now? Those foals belong to your ranches, legally speaking." Jake looked at Sarah, seeing his own. Thoughts reflected in her eyes. "They belong to life now," she said quietly. "Look at them. They're thriving here. That Mustang's given them something we never could, the skills to survive in true freedom. We can't separate them, Jake." "Agreed, but we can help." He outlined a plan that would change how they all thought about the relationship between wild and domestic horses. Over the next few months, Pine Creek Ranch became something unprecedented, a sanctuary where the boundary between wild and domestic became beautifully blurred. The Black Mustang, who they now called Guardian, continued his mission, but with the ranchers' cooperation rather than opposition. They reinforced the valley's natural defenses, provided supplementary feed during harsh weather, and most importantly, learned from the wild horses' sophisticated social structures and survival strategies. The foals that Guardian had rescued grew strong and confident, eventually able to choose between returning to the ranches or remaining with the wild herd. Word spread about the extraordinary Mustang who bridged two worlds, drawing researchers and wildlife experts who documented his unprecedented behavior. But for Jake, the most powerful lesson was much simpler, that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from being humble enough to learn from those we once misunderstood. Guardian's legacy lived on through the generations of horses he saved and taught, creating a new model of coexistence between wild and domestic horses. The ranchers of the valley learned to see their role differently, not as owners, but as partners in preserving something magnificent and free. As Jake sat on his porch one evening, watching Guardian's herd move through the distant meadows, he reflected on how one horse's courage had transformed their entire community. The Mustang had taught them that true strength lies not in domination, but in protection, and that the most powerful bonds are formed when we recognize the wisdom in those different from ourselves. 6 months after Guardian's remarkable revelation, Pine Creek Ranch had transformed into something extraordinary. The early morning sun painted the valley in soft gold as Jake made his way to the newly constructed observation platform overlooking Carter Valley. He'd built it not just for monitoring the herds, but as a place where people could witness something remarkable, the blending of two worlds that most thought could never coexist. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned equine behaviorist from the University of Colorado, stood beside him, her notebook filled with observations. What Guardian has created here goes beyond basic herd behavior, she explained, gesturing to where the black Mustang was working with a group of young horses. He's developed a sophisticated teaching system that combines wild survival skills with an understanding of human-taught behaviors. Below them, Guardian demonstrated this unique approach. He was showing a group of young horses, both previously domestic and wild-born, how to cross a shallow river. But instead of simply leading them across, he was teaching them to read the water's depth using techniques that showed remarkable problem-solving ability. See how he tests each section first, Elena pointed out. He's not just teaching them to cross water, he's teaching them to think critically about their environment. This kind of metacognition in horses is unprecedented. The sound of approaching hooves drew their attention. Sarah Thompson rode up on her new mare, a beautiful buckskin who'd been one of Guardian's first rescued foals. The horse moved with the confident grace of one who knew both worlds, comfortable with a rider, but carrying herself with the awareness of a wild horse. "The wolf pack's been spotted near Miller's Creek," Sarah reported, dismounting smoothly. "But watch this." She pulled out her phone, showing them footage from the new wildlife cameras they'd installed throughout the valley. The video showed Guardian organizing the herd's younger members into what Eleanor had termed learning pods, small groups that practice specific skills under the guidance of experienced horses. He's preparing them, Jake realized. He knew. The wolves were coming before we did. Elena nodded enthusiastically. This is what makes Guardian's method so revolutionary. He's not just teaching survival skills. He's creating a sustainable system of knowledge transfer. These horses will be able to teach these skills to future generations. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mark Collins, now promoted to head ranger of the expanded wildlife protection area they'd established around Carter Valley. "You all need to see this," he called out, waving them over to his truck. On his laptop, satellite imagery showed something concerning. The drought that had initially driven the wolves into their territory was spreading. More predators were being forced into new areas, and other ranches across the state were reporting increased attacks on their livestock. "We're getting calls from ranchers as far as Wyoming," Mark explained. "They want to know more about Guardian's program. They're seeing the same pattern. Wild horses trying to protect domestic ones from predators, but without Guardian's success rate." Jake leaned back, running a hand through his graying hair. "Guardian's shown us the way, but we need to do more. These horses are teaching us something about cooperation that goes beyond just survival." Over the next few hours, they developed an ambitious plan. Pine Creek Ranch would become a training center, not just for horses, but for ranchers and wildlife experts. They would document Guardian's methods, study the unique social structure he'd created, and develop ways to implement similar programs in other areas. Sarah's eyes lit up with possibility. "Remember how we used to think keeping domestic horses separate from wild ones was the only way? Guardian proved that the opposite is true. They're stronger together, each bringing different strengths to the herd." As if understanding the importance of the moment, Guardian appeared on the ridge above them. The morning light caught his black coat, making him seem to glow against the landscape he'd helped transform. Behind him, his integrated herd moved with practiced precision, domestic and wild horses working together, the younger ones protected in the center, the experienced ones scanning for threats. "There's something else," Eleanor added, reviewing her notes. "The horses Guardian has trained. They're showing elevated levels of emotional intelligence. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They're solving problems we never thought horses could solve. Jake watched as Guardian led his herd through a series of natural obstacles, each movement a lesson in itself. The domestic foals had learned to move with the silent grace of their wild cousins, while the wild-born young ones had developed the confidence to approach human structures without fear. It's like he's teaching them that strength doesn't mean choosing one world over the other, Jake mused. It's about taking the best of both. The next few weeks saw an influx of visitors to Pine Creek Ranch, researchers, ranchers, wildlife, experts, all coming to witness Guardian's extraordinary impact. But perhaps the most meaningful visit came from an unexpected source. Tom Rogers, the once skeptical rancher who dismissed Guardian's behavior as a fairy tale, arrived one morning. With his granddaughter Emily, the young girl, who used a wheelchair due to a riding accident years ago, had been afraid of horses ever since. But something about Guardian's story had sparked her interest. They watched from the observation platform as Guardian noticed their presence. The great black horse approached slowly, demonstrating the same patience he showed with young foals. To everyone's amazement, he seemed to understand Emily's hesitation, maintaining a careful distance while keeping his body language open and calm. Over the course of an hour, Guardian did something remarkable. He brought several of his gentler horses forward, creating a graduated introduction that allowed Emily to grow comfortable at her own pace. By the end of the visit, she was hand-feeding a young mare who'd once been too scared to approach humans herself. "He's not just teaching horses," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion as he watched his granddaughter smile for the first time. "In years, he's teaching all of us." The success of Guardian's program led to the establishment of what they called the Integrated Herd Initiative. Ranchers across the western United States began adopting similar approaches, creating protected spaces where domestic and wild horses could interact and learn from each other. But perhaps the most powerful moment came during that year's harshest winter storm. The wolf pack, desperate for food, launched their most aggressive attack yet. But this time, they found themselves facing not just Guardian's trained herd, but a community prepared to protect their own. Through the howling wind and swirling snow, domestic and wild horses moved as one unit, using Guardian strategies to protect the vulnerable. Ranchers and rangers worked together, using their understanding of both worlds to support the horses' natural defenses. The wolves retreated, not just from superior numbers, but from something they'd never encountered before. A perfectly coordinated defense that bridged the gap between wild and domestic, between human and animal intelligence. As the storm cleared, Jake stood with Sarah and Elena, watching Guardian lead his integrated herd back to safety. The black Mustang had created more than just a sanctuary. He'd pioneered a new way of thinking about cooperation, protection, and the artificial boundaries we create between wild and tame. "You know what Guardians really taught us?" Jake said, his voice carrying the weight of understanding earned through years of watching this remarkable horse, that the strongest fence isn't the one that keeps things separated. It's the bond that brings them together. As spring bloomed across Carter Valley, the success of Guardian's integrated herd had drawn attention from an unexpected source. A film crew from National Geographic arrived at Pine Creek Ranch, their cameras ready to document what they called the Guardian phenomenon. But Jake Mitchell knew they were about to witness something even more extraordinary. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had made a fascinating discovery through her ongoing research. Guardian isn't just teaching survival skills anymore, she explained to the documentary team as they set up their equipment. He's developing what we can only describe as a cultural transmission of knowledge. These horses are learning to innovate, to solve problems we've never seen horses tackle before. The film crew watched in amazement as Guardian demonstrated this evolution. A young foal had become trapped in a muddy section of the stream, a situation that would typically cause panic. Instead of rushing in, Guardian orchestrated a precise rescue operation. He directed several horses to create a living bridge with their bodies, allowing the foal to find secure footing and escape. "That's not instinct," Elena emphasized, her voice filled with excitement. "That's creative problem-solving, being taught and shared across the herd. It's revolutionary." Sarah Thompson, who had become the ranch's head of rehabilitation, brought forward a new arrival, a traumatized mare rescued from an abusive situation. The horse was skittish, distrustful of humans and other horses alike, under normal circumstances. Integrating such a damaged animal would take months of careful rehabilitation. Guardian approached the nervous mare with extraordinary sensitivity. The film crew fell silent, their cameras capturing every nuance as the black stallion demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence that challenged everything they thought they knew about horses. Over the next few hours, they watched as Guardian used his own herd members as intermediaries, carefully orchestrating gradual interactions that helped the traumatized mare feel safe. He seemed to understand exactly when to push and when to back, off-reading subtle body language cues that even experienced handlers might miss. "This goes beyond basic empathy," Elena noted, furiously documenting the interaction. "He's creating a therapeutic environment, using the herd's social structure as a healing tool." The National Geographic producer, Lisa Chen, shook her head in amazement. "In all my years filming wildlife, I've never seen anything like this. He's not just leading them, he's counseling them." But the most profound demonstration of Guardian's impact came later that afternoon. Emily Rogers, Tom's granddaughter who had overcome her fear of horses through Guardian's gentle guidance, had been working on a special project. With the help of local engineers and veterinarians, she had developed an adaptive riding program for other differently abled children. The film crew captured the moment as a young boy with autism met Guardian's herd for the first time. The child, who typically struggled with overwhelming environments, found a peculiar peace among the horses. Guardian seemed to sense the boy's special needs, adjusting the herd's energy to create a calmer, more structured space. "What we're seeing here," Dr. Rodriguez explained, "is the emergence of what we might call equine emotional engineering. Guardian is actively creating environments that support healing and growth, not just for horses, but for humans as well." The implications of Guardian's methods reached far beyond Carter Valley. Universities began developing research programs based on the integrated herd model. Therapeutic riding centers adopted Guardian's gentle, progressive approach to rehabilitation. Even traditional ranching practices started to evolve, incorporating lessons learned from the wild horse's extraordinary teaching methods. But perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected quarter. A group of wildlife conservation experts arrived from Wyoming, bringing urgent news about a crisis in Yellowstone National Park. A series of natural disasters had disrupted traditional wildlife corridors, leading to dangerous conflicts between predators and prey species. "We need Guardian's expertise," explained Dr. James Runningwolf, a wildlife biologist. "Not just his methods with horses, but his understanding of how to create cooperative systems in nature." The challenge was unprecedented. Could Guardian's principles of integration and cooperation work on a larger scale? Could they help restore balance to an ecosystem in crisis? Jake and Sarah exchanged glances. "Guardians never backed down from a challenge," Jake said, watching as the black stallion guided his herd through their evening exercises. "But this would be different. We're talking about affecting change across an entire ecosystem." Over the next few weeks, they developed an ambitious plan. Using Guardian's herd as a model, they would create a series of protected corridors connecting different habitats. The integrated herds would act as natural shepherds, helping to guide other species along safer routes, reducing conflicts with predators, and maintaining the delicate balance of the ecosystem. The film crew documented everything as Guardians. Principles were put to the test on a grand scale. They captured remarkable footage of wild horses working in coordination with park rangers to guide elk herds away from wolf territories during vulnerable calving seasons. They filmed domestic horses, trained in Guardian's methods, helping to maintain these wildlife corridors through regular patrols. But the most extraordinary footage came during an unexpected forest fire. As flames threatened a section of the park, Guardian's integrated approach proved invaluable. The horses, combining wild instinct with trained response, helped lead numerous species to safety through pre-established evacuation routes. "What we're witnessing," Dr. Runningwolf explained, "to the cameras is the emergence of a new kind of environmental stewardship. Guardian has shown us that when we break down the artificial barriers between wild and domestic, between human management and natural processes, we create something more resilient than either could be alone." Back at Pine Creek Ranch, Emily's adaptive riding program had grown into a full-fledged therapeutic center. Children and adults with various challenges found healing in the unique environment Guardian had created. The integrated herd provided a natural support system that traditional therapy programs couldn't replicate. One afternoon, as the film crew captured their final shots, a remarkable scene unfolded. A young girl with selective mutism, who hadn't spoken in years, found her voice among the horses. Guardian had gradually introduced her to different members of his herd, each interaction building her confidence. When she finally spoke, it was to thank the great black horse who had helped her feel safe enough to break her silence. The National Geographic documentary titled "Guardian, the Horse Who Changed the World" premiered to international acclaim. But for those who knew him best, Guardian's greatest achievement wasn't in the grand gestures captured on film. It was in the quiet moments of transformation that happened every day in Carter Valley. As Jake watched Guardian lead his herd under a star-filled Montana sky, he reflected on how one horse's courage and compassion had rippled out to touch so many lives. The black Mustang had shown them that true leadership isn't about control or dominance. It's about creating spaces where others can grow, heal, and discover their own strength. "You know what Guardian's really teaching us?" Jake said to Sarah as they observed the peaceful scene. "That the real measure of success isn't in what you achieve for yourself, but in how many others you lift up along the way." Guardian's legacy had grown far beyond saving a few foals from wolves. He had pioneered a new understanding of how different species, different worlds, and different abilities could come together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. In doing so, he had shown that the most powerful force for change isn't competition or control, but the simple act of caring enough to protect and nurture those around you. Years after Guardian's story had touched millions through the National Geographic documentary, Pine Creek Ranch faced its greatest challenge yet. A severe drought, worse than any in recorded history, threatened not just the integrated herd program, but the entire ecosystem they'd worked so hard to build. Jake Mitchell stood at the observation platform, watching dark clouds gather on the horizon. But these weren't the rain clouds they desperately needed. A massive wildfire in the neighboring state had filled the air with smoke, creating an apocalyptic orange glow across Carter Valley. "The satellite data doesn't look good," Dr. Elena Rodriguez said, showing him the latest climate projections on her tablet. "Water sources are drying up across 3 states. Wildlife migrations are being disrupted. We're looking at a potential ecological disaster." But even in this crisis, Guardian proved that his greatest gift wasn't just his intelligence, it was his ability to adapt and innovate. The great black stallion had begun leading his herd on precisely timed rotations between water sources, ensuring no single area was overgrazed or depleted. More remarkably, he seemed to be teaching this resource management to other wild herds in the region. "Look at this," Sarah called out, reviewing footage from their wildlife cameras. The videos showed Guardian's herd creating channels in dry creek beds, effectively directing what little rainwater they received to where it was needed most. The horses used their hooves to dig small depressions that collected dew and morning condensation, creating micro-oases for smaller wildlife. "He's not just adapting," Dr. Runningwolf observed, having returned to study this new phenomenon. "He's actively engineering environmental solutions. This goes beyond anything we've documented in equine behavior." The situation reached a critical point when the wildfire, driven by hot winds, jumped containment lines and threatened Carter Valley. Emergency services were stretched thin across multiple states, and evacuation seemed impossible with so many animals at risk. But Guardian had prepared for this too. Over the months of drought, he'd been teaching the integrated herd more than just water conservation. He'd developed escape routes, safe zones, and what Elena called emergency response protocols that no one had even noticed until they needed them. As the fire approached, Guardian's herd split into smaller units, each led by experienced horses he'd trained. These groups began guiding not just other horses, but elk, deer, and even smaller wildlife, along safe passages away from the advancing flames. The horses used their bodies to create protective barriers around vulnerable young animals, sharing the safety techniques that Guardian had perfected over the years. Jake and his team worked tirelessly alongside the firefighters, but it was Guardian's unprecedented organization that made the difference. The Black Stallion had somehow mapped out natural fire breaks and water sources that weren't on any human surveys, leading both wild and domestic animals to safety with an efficiency that left even veteran Forest Service members in awe. He's not just saving individual animals, Elena realized, documenting everything. He's preserving entire species behavioral knowledge. These animals aren't just surviving, they're learning survival strategies they can pass on to future generations. When the fire finally passed, leaving parts of the valley scarred but not destroyed, they discovered something remarkable. The areas where Guardian had implemented his water conservation techniques had created natural fire barriers. The small channels and depressions his herd had dug had helped protect crucial vegetation, giving the ecosystem a fighting chance to recover. But Guardian's most profound impact came in the fire's aftermath. As displaced wildlife began returning to the valley, the integrated herd took on a new role. Guardian organized his horses into what Elena termed rehabilitation units, helping injured animals find food and water, protecting vulnerable young, and even assisting other species in rebuilding their habitats. Emily Rogers, now a graduate, student in environmental science, developed a groundbreaking study of Guardian's post-disaster recovery methods. "He's showing us that resilience isn't just about surviving a crisis," she explained to a group of international researchers. "It's about building back stronger, using adversity as a catalyst for positive change." The drought and fire had tested everything Guardian had built, but in doing so, they revealed the true depth of his legacy. The integrated herd program had evolved into something far more significant, a model for ecological resilience that combined the best of natural instinct and learned adaptation. Universities began implementing what they called the Guardian Protocol in wildlife rehabilitation programs. Conservation projects worldwide started incorporating his methods of resource management and species cooperation. The Black Stallion's influence had grown from saving a few foals to pioneering a new understanding of how ecosystems could adapt and thrive in a changing world. One morning, as the first rains in months began to fall over Carter Valley, Jake found Guardian standing on a ridge overlooking the recovering landscape. The great horse's coat was graying slightly with age, but his presence was as powerful as ever. Below him, his integrated herd worked seamlessly to protect new growth, their actions helping to speed the valley's natural regeneration. "You know what amazes me most?" Sarah said, joining Jake in the gentle rain. "Every time we think we understand the limits of what's possible, Guardian shows us there's so much more to learn." The Black Stallion had proven that true strength lies not in dominating nature, but in understanding and working with it. His legacy wasn't just in the horses he'd saved or the techniques he'd developed. It was in showing that adaptation, cooperation and compassion were not just moral choices, but survival strategies. Dr. Elena Rodriguez completed her definitive study of Guardian's methods, titled Beyond Instinct: The Evolution of Cooperative Intelligence in Equine Behavior. But even she admitted that science alone couldn't fully explain what they'd witnessed. "Guardian has demonstrated something profound," she wrote in her conclusion. "That intelligence without empathy is limited, that strength without cooperation is fragile, and that the greatest innovations often come from seeing beyond the boundaries we've drawn between wild and tame, between species, between what we think is possible and what actually is." As new life began returning to the valley, Guardian's influence continued to expand in unexpected ways. The integrated herd program had become a model for wildlife rehabilitation centers globally. Young horses born into Guardian's herd were sought after for their unique combination of natural instincts and cooperative behaviors. But perhaps his most lasting impact was on how humans understood their role in the natural world. Guardian had shown that true stewardship wasn't about control. It was about creating conditions where life in all its forms could adapt, learn, and thrive together. Jake watched as Guardian led a group of young horses through their morning exercises, teaching them not just survival skills, but the deeper wisdom of cooperation and community. The great Black Stallion had transformed from a mysterious figure stealing foals in the night to a symbol of hope and resilience. showing that the most powerful changes often begin with a single act of compassion. Guardian didn't just save those Foals, Jake reflected, standing in the healing rain. He saved something in us too, our ability to see beyond our preconceptions, to learn from those we once feared, and to find strength in working together. The valley was healing, different from before, but perhaps stronger for having faced such challenges. And through it all, Guardian continued his work, teaching each new generation that the greatest power lies not in standing alone, but in standing together, wild and domestic, human and animal, all part of a greater whole. A decade after Guardian first appeared at Pine Creek Ranch, his influence had spread far beyond the boundaries of Carter Valley. The once mysterious black Mustang had become a living legend, but his greatest challenge and most profound lesson was yet to come. One crisp autumn morning, Jake noticed something different about Guardian's behavior. The aging stallion, his muzzle now flecked with gray, was systematically gathering his most experienced horses. Through the observation cameras, they watched as Guardian appeared to be conducting what Elena could only describe as master classes. Intensive training sessions with specific members of the herd. He's preparing them, Elena realized, reviewing the footage. It's like he's passing on everything he knows, creating a new generation of teachers. The significance of Guardian's actions became clear when they discovered the first signs of his aging. The great horse who had once moved like shadow now showed subtle signs of slowing down. But instead of diminishing his influence, Guardian's physical limitations seemed to inspire him to develop even more sophisticated teaching methods. "Look at how he's structured this," Sarah pointed out during one of his training sessions. Guardian had organized his most accomplished students into specialized groups. Some focused on protection strategies, others on resource management, and still others on what they now recognized as emotional support and rehabilitation techniques. Emily Rogers, who had completed her PhD studying Guardian's methods, noticed something remarkable about this new phase. "He's not just teaching them to replicate what he does," she explained. "He's teaching them to think independently, to adapt his methods to their own strengths." The transformation was most evident in how the herd handled new challenges. When a group of injured wild horses arrived in the valley, Guardian didn't handle their rehabilitation himself as he once would have. Instead, he coordinated his trained teams, each contributing their specialized skills to the recovery effort. Dr. Running Wolf, who had returned to document this evolution, was amazed by the sophistication of Guardian's legacy planning. "He's creating a sustainable system," he observed, "one that will continue long after he's gone." But Guardian's most profound impact came through an unexpected crisis. A new housing development planned near the valley threatened to disrupt crucial wildlife corridors. The developers argued that the integrated herd program, while admirable, couldn't take precedence over human expansion. In response, Guardian did something extraordinary. He began leading carefully orchestrated demonstrations of his herd's capabilities, seemingly aware of when government officials and environmental assessors were present. The aging stallion showed how his trained horses helped maintain natural fire breaks, managed water resources, and facilitated the safe movement of wildlife through developed areas. "He's not just showing them what we'd lose," Jake realized. "He's showing them how humans and nature can coexist if we're smart enough to learn from him." The demonstrations caught the attention of urban planners and sustainability experts. They began studying how Guardian's methods of space utilization and resource management could be applied to urban development. The result was a revolutionary approach to bio-integrated architecture, designing human spaces that worked with natural systems rather than against them. The development project was ultimately modified, incorporating wildlife corridors and natural buffer zones based on Guardian's proven patterns. But more importantly, it set a precedent for how future expansion projects would be evaluated. As Guardian's physical strength gradually diminished, his wisdom seemed to grow. He began spending more time with the younger members of the herd, not just teaching them survival skills, but what Elena called emotional intelligence exercises. They watched in amazement as he taught young horses how to identify and respond to signs of distress in other animals, how to moderate their own reactions, and how to build trust across species boundaries. One day, they witnessed something extraordinary. A young autistic girl who had never connected with traditional therapy horses was brought to the ranch. Guardian, now moving slowly but deliberately, orchestrated a sequence of interactions that demonstrated his deepest understanding yet of human psychology. He first sent forward a young horse he had trained, one with a particularly gentle demeanor. But what amazed everyone was how this horse seemed to mirror the girl's own way of moving and interacting with the world. Guardian had somehow taught his students not just to help, but to empathize and adapt to individual needs. "He's not just leaving us a set of techniques," Emily observed, watching the breakthrough unfold. "He's leaving us a new way of understanding connection itself." Guardian's influence began appearing in unexpected places. Architects consulted the ranch when designing animal-friendly urban spaces. Psychologists studied his methods for insights into non-verbal communication. Even artificial intelligence researchers became interested in his sophisticated approach to problem-solving and knowledge transfer. As winter approached, Guardian's age became more apparent, but the valley didn't feel the anxiety that might have come with this transition. Instead, there was a sense of witnessing the completion of something remarkable. The aging stallion had transformed his original mission of protecting vulnerable foals into a comprehensive system of care, adaptation, and renewal. One clear morning, they found Guardian on his favorite ridge, watching the sunrise over his valley. Below him, his trained horses were already at work, teaching, protecting, healing. Each group moved with purpose and intelligence, implementing the lessons he had spent years perfecting. Jake stood quietly beside the great horse, understanding that they were witnessing not an ending, but a transition. Guardian had created something that would continue to grow and evolve long after him. His legacy wasn't just in the horses he'd saved or the methods he'd developed. It was in showing that true leadership means preparing others to carry on without you. "You know what his final lesson is," Sarah said softly, watching young horses confidently implement Guardian's techniques with their own innovative twists. "That the greatest achievement isn't in what you do yourself, but in what you inspire others to become." Guardian's story had evolved from a simple tale of rescue to a profound demonstration of how wisdom, compassion, and foresight could transform entire communities. He had shown that the most powerful force for change wasn't in dramatic gestures, but in the patient work of teaching, sharing, and preparing future generations. As the sun rose higher, Guardian's trained horses began their daily routines without needing his direct guidance. Each one carried a piece of his wisdom, adapted through their own experiences and personalities. The valley had become a living laboratory of his principles, where each new challenge was met with the intelligence and compassion he had instilled. The aging stallion turned to look at Jake, his eyes still bright with the intelligence that had changed so many lives. In that moment, Jake understood that Guardian's greatest gift hadn't been in the problems he solved, but in teaching others how to solve problems themselves. He never just wanted to be a leader, Elena reflected, watching the scene unfold. He wanted to create a community of leaders. As Guardian slowly made his way down from the ridge, followed by a new generation of horses he had trained, his legacy was evident in every aspect of the valley. He had transformed not just a piece of land, but an entire way of thinking about the relationship between humans, animals, and the natural world. The integrated herd program continued to evolve, each new generation adding their own insights to Guardian's foundation. The valley became a place where boundaries between wild and domestic, between human and animal intelligence, continuously dissolved and reformed in ever more harmonious ways. Guardian had shown them that true strength lies not in power over others, but in the power to lift others up. His legacy lived on, not just in the horses he trained or the lives he touched, but in the endless ripples of positive change that continued to spread from that first brave act of stealing foals to save them. As the sun climbed higher over Carter Valley, Guardian's influence could be seen in every corner, not as a shadow of what had been, but as a living, growing force for positive change that would continue to evolve and inspire long into the future. 20 years after Guardian first appeared at Pine Creek Ranch, his physical presence had become a cherished memory, but his influence continued to grow in ways no one could have predicted. The integrated herd program he'd established had evolved into a global model for wildlife conservation and rehabilitation, spawning similar initiatives across 5 continents. Jake Mitchell, his hair now completely silver, stood at the newly dedicated Guardian Center for Ecological Innovation, a state-of-the-art research facility built where he'd first spotted the mysterious black stallion. The center had become a beacon of hope for endangered species worldwide, implementing Guardian's principles of cooperative survival on an unprecedented scale. What we're seeing now is extraordinary, Dr. Elena Rodriguez explained to a group of international researchers. The methods Guardian developed for horses are being successfully adapted for everything from elephant conservation in Africa to wolf rehabilitation in Alaska. The most remarkable development came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen, a pioneering researcher in animal cognition, had made a groundbreaking discovery while studying recordings of Guardian's teaching methods. She identified patterns in his behavior that suggested a level of strategic thinking, far beyond what science had previously attributed to horses. Guardian wasn't just teaching specific skills, Dr. Chen explained, presenting her findings to a packed auditorium. He was teaching a methodology for learning itself. We're now seeing 3rd and 4th generation horses displaying problem-solving abilities that build upon and exceed his original techniques. This revelation led to the development of what became known as the Guardian Protocol, a revolutionary approach to animal rehabilitation that focused not just on survival skills, but on developing cognitive and emotional intelligence across species. The results were transforming wildlife conservation worldwide. Emily Rogers, now the Director of Adaptive Wildlife Programs at the Center, had implemented Guardian's methods in ways that challenged conventional wisdom about animal capabilities. Under her guidance, they'd successfully rehabilitated species previously thought impossible to reintegrate into the wild. Guardian showed us that the key isn't just teaching animals how to survive, Emily explained during a TED Talk that would later go viral. It's teaching them how to teach others. Each successful rehabilitation creates a cascade effect of knowledge sharing in the wild. The impact of Guardian's legacy became dramatically clear during an unprecedented environmental crisis. Climate change had forced mass wildlife migrations across the globe, creating dangerous conflicts between species and human settlements. But in areas where the Guardian Protocol had been implemented, something remarkable was happening. Animals trained through Guardian's methods were actively helping to facilitate peaceful coexistence. Elephants in Kenya, taught using his principles of resource management, began creating natural corridors that benefited multiple species while avoiding human settlements. Wolves in Yellowstone, rehabilitated using his cooperative survival techniques, showed unprecedented skills in maintaining territorial boundaries that reduced conflicts with ranchers. What we're witnessing, Dr. Running Wolf announced at a UN environmental summit, is the emergence of a new paradigm in wildlife behavior. These animals aren't just surviving, they're actively participating in ecosystem management. The most profound validation of Guardian's methods came from an unexpected quarter. A group of artificial intelligence researchers studying the complex decision-making patterns in his teaching techniques discovered principles that revolutionized machine learning algorithms. Guardian's approach to problem-solving combined emotional intelligence with strategic thinking in ways we're only beginning to understand, explained Dr. Marcus Wong, lead researcher at the MIT Animal Cognition Lab. He demonstrated that true intelligence isn't just about processing information, it's about understanding context, relationships, and long-term consequences. Back at Pine Creek Ranch, the original herd that Guardian had trained continued to evolve his methods. Each generation seemed to build upon his foundation, developing increasingly sophisticated approaches to challenges he could never have foreseen. One morning, Jake witnessed something that brought tears to his eyes. A young horse, born years after Guardian's time, was teaching a group of rehabilitation horses using methods that clearly originated from Guardian, but had been adapted and refined through generations of experience. "Look at how she's structured the lesson," Sarah observed, watching through binoculars. "She's not just showing them what to do, she's helping them understand why, just like he did. But she's adding new elements, adapting his techniques for today's challenges." The Guardian Center had become a hub for what they called cross-species intelligence studies. Researchers from around the world came to study how different animals adapted and built upon Guardian's methods. The results were transforming our understanding of animal cognition and emotional intelligence. One project, led by Dr. Elena's daughter Marina Rodriguez, focused on documenting what they called cascading wisdom, the way Guardian's teaching methods had spread through natural wildlife populations, evolving and adapting to serve different species' needs. "We're seeing his influence in ways we never expected," Marina explained, showing footage of wild horses in Mongolia naturally adopting protective behaviors that could be traced back to Guardian's original techniques. "It's like he created a universal language of survival and cooperation that transcends species boundaries." The impact on human understanding of animal intelligence was profound. Guardian's legacy had helped bridge the gap between scientific observation and emotional understanding, creating a new approach to wildlife conservation that recognized animals as active participants in their own survival. Guardian didn't just teach us about horses, Jake reflected during the center's 20th anniversary celebration. He taught us about the true nature of intelligence, wisdom, and legacy. He showed us that the greatest teachers don't create followers, they create new teachers. As the sun set over Carter Valley, the descendants of Guardian's original herd moved with purpose and grace across the landscape he had helped protect. Each generation had added their own wisdom to his foundation, creating an ever-evolving legacy of adaptation and cooperation. The valley had become more than just a sanctuary. It was a living laboratory of possibility where the boundaries between species continued to dissolve in favor of mutual understanding and support. Guardian's influence had grown from saving a few foals to transforming humanity's relationship with the natural world. "You know what amazes me most?" Sarah said, watching a new group of rehabilitation horses learn from their experienced teachers. Guardian's gift wasn't just in what he taught. It was in showing us that every creature has the capacity to learn, to teach, and to contribute to something greater than themselves. As night fell over the valley, the stars reflected in the eyes of horses who carried Guardian's wisdom in their DNA. His legacy lived on not just in their behaviors, but in the way humans had learned to see the natural world, not as something to be conquered or controlled, but as a community of intelligent beings, each with something to teach and something to learn. The story of a mysterious black stallion who stole foals to save them had become a catalyst for a global transformation in how humans understood and interacted with the natural world. Guardian had shown that the greatest power lies not in domination, but in the patient work of teaching others to discover their own strength. His legacy continued to grow, carried forward by each new generation that built upon his wisdom, adapting and evolving his methods to meet the challenges of a changing world. In the end, Guardian had given them something far more valuable than a set of techniques or strategies. He had shown them a new way of seeing the world, where cooperation, empathy, and shared wisdom could create possibilities beyond imagination. As the Guardian Center for Ecological Innovation celebrated its 25th anniversary, a remarkable discovery shook the scientific community. A team of geneticists studying the descendants of Guardian's original herd found something unprecedented, a unique genetic marker that appeared to be linked to enhanced cognitive and emotional intelligence capabilities. "We've identified what we're calling the Guardian sequence," announced Dr. Amelia Foster, lead geneticist at the Stanford Wildlife Genetics Lab. "It's a specific genetic pattern that seems to facilitate advanced learning and teaching behaviors. What's extraordinary is that we're seeing this sequence being naturally selected for and strengthened in subsequent generations." The implications were staggering. Guardian hadn't just taught behaviors, he had somehow triggered an evolutionary adaptation that favored intelligence, empathy, and cooperative learning. His influence had literally become encoded in the DNA of future generations. Jake Mitchell, now in his 70s but still sharp as ever, sat in his favorite spot overlooking Carter Valley as he processed this news. Below him, the latest generation of horses moved with a grace and purpose that seemed to validate these findings. They weren't just repeating learned behaviors, they were innovating, creating new solutions to emerging challenges. "Watch this," Emily Rogers said, showing him footage from their latest research project. A young mare, 6 generations removed from Guardian's original herd, was teaching a group of rescued horses. But she wasn't just demonstrating survival skills. She was using tools, manipulating branches and rocks to create teaching aids in ways that showed remarkable cognitive sophistication. Dr. Marina Rodriguez, who had taken over from her mother Elena as head of behavioral studies, had documented over 50 new teaching techniques that had evolved from Guardian's original methods. "These horses aren't just preserving his legacy," she explained. "They're building upon it, creating new approaches we never could have imagined." The most profound validation came during an unprecedented environmental crisis. A series of massive earthquakes had disrupted traditional migration routes across North America, forcing wildlife to adapt quickly or perish. In areas where Guardian's descendants had been integrated into wild populations, something remarkable occurred. The horses began creating new migration paths, not just for themselves but for other species as well. They used their advanced problem-solving abilities to identify safe routes, establish rest areas, and even create temporary shelters using natural materials. More incredibly, they actively taught these survival strategies to other animals. "What we're seeing is beyond adaptation," Dr. Runningwolf explained during an emergency wildlife conservation summit. "These horses are actively engineering solutions to environmental challenges. They're not just surviving change, they're helping entire ecosystems adapt." The impact on human understanding of animal intelligence was revolutionary. The Guardian Center established the world's first cross-species communication institute, dedicated to studying and facilitating advanced interactions between different species. The results challenged everything we thought we knew about animal consciousness. Sarah Thompson's granddaughter Lucy had developed a groundbreaking program that used Guardian's principles to help endangered species recover from near extinction. Her work with a small population of mountain gorillas in Rwanda showed that when taught using Guardian's methods, the gorillas not only recovered, but began teaching survival skills to other primate species. Guardian showed us that intelligence isn't a hierarchy with humans at the top, Lucy explained, in a presentation that captured global attention. It's a web of interconnected abilities, each species bringing unique perspectives and solutions to shared challenges. The scientific implications expanded beyond wildlife conservation. The Guardian sequence became a subject of intense study in fields ranging from neuroscience to artificial intelligence. Researchers discovered that the same principles that made Guardian's teaching methods so effective could revolutionize human learning and problem-solving. One morning, as Jake watched the sunrise over Carter Valley, he witnessed something that brought the magnitude of Guardian's legacy into sharp focus. A young foal, struggling with a physical disability, was being taught by 3 different horses, each specializing in different aspects of adaptation. They weren't just helping the foal survive, they were teaching it how to turn its differences into strengths. This is what Guardian was really preparing us for, Jake realized, sharing his thoughts with Sarah. He wasn't just teaching survival. He was showing us how to evolve, how to turn challenges into catalysts for positive change. The Guardian Center had become a beacon of hope in a world facing unprecedented environmental challenges. Its success inspired similar centers across the globe, each adapting Guardian's principles to local needs and challenges. From the Amazon rainforest to the Australian outback, his legacy was helping species not just survive, but thrive in changing conditions. Guardian's gift wasn't just in what he taught, Emily reflected during a global conservation conference. It was in showing us that every challenge, every limitation, carries within it the seeds of new possibilities. As the sun set on another day in Carter Valley, the descendants of Guardian's herd continued their work, each generation adding new chapters to his legacy. They had become more than just survivors or teachers. They were pioneers, showing how intelligence, empathy, and cooperation could create solutions that no single species could achieve alone. The story of a mysterious black stallion who once stole foals to save them had evolved into something far greater. Guardian had initiated a transformation in how life itself adapted and evolved, showing that the greatest power lies not in individual strength, but in the ability to learn, teach, and grow together. As night fell over the valley, Jake watched the stars emerge, thinking about how a single act of compassion had sparked a revolution in understanding that continued to grow and evolve. Guardian's legacy lived on not just in genes or behaviors, but in the endless possibilities that arise when wisdom is shared across boundaries of species and time. You know what Guardian's final lesson really was? Jake said to the gathered researchers and conservationists, that the future belongs not to the strongest or the most intelligent, but to those who understand that true evolution comes through cooperation, compassion, and the courage to teach others what we know. The valley had become more than a sanctuary or research center. It was a living testament to the power of wisdom shared across generations and species. Guardian's influence continued to grow, carried forward by each new discovery, each new adaptation, each new understanding of how life could evolve when guided by intelligence and compassion. As a new day dawned over Carter Valley, the legacy of the black stallion who changed the world lived on, not as a static memory, but as an ever-evolving force for positive change, showing that the greatest achievements come not from standing alone, but from helping others rise alongside us. 30 years after Guardian's first appearance, a groundbreaking discovery at the Guardian Center revealed something that would redefine our understanding of his legacy forever. A team of quantum biologists studying the unusual patterns of information transfer among Guardian's descendants identified what they called quantum coherence in the horse's neural networks. It's beyond anything we've ever seen, Dr. Sophia Chen explained, her voice filled with amazement as she presented her findings to the International Society for Consciousness Studies. These horses aren't just communicating through conventional means, they're accessing quantum fields of information that transcend physical limitations. The implications were revolutionary. Guardian hadn't just passed on genetic traits or taught behaviors, he had somehow activated a latent ability in horses to access and share information through quantum entanglement, a capability that science had previously thought impossible in biological systems. Jake Mitchell, now approaching his 80s but still sharp as ever, watched in wonder as the latest generation of Guardian's descendants demonstrated abilities that seemed almost miraculous. Young horses were showing signs of understanding and responding to events before they happened, sharing complex information instantaneously across vast distances and developing solutions to problems they had never encountered. "Look at this," Marina Rodriguez said, showing him real-time data from their quantum monitoring equipment. A group of horses was simultaneously responding to a threat none of them could physically see or hear, coordinating their movements with perfect precision across multiple locations in the valley. The Guardian Center had attracted the attention of the world's leading physicists and consciousness researchers. Dr. James Whitman, a pioneer in quantum biology, had developed a theory that Guardian's teaching methods had somehow activated dormant quantum capabilities in the equine brain. What we're witnessing isn't just evolution, Dr. Whitman explained during a TED Talk that would later be viewed by millions. It's the emergence of a new form of consciousness, one that operates beyond the constraints of classical physics. The most stunning validation of this theory came during a massive solar storm that disrupted global communication systems. While human technology failed, Guardian's descendants maintained their ability to coordinate and share information across continents. Horses trained in his methods were simultaneously responding to challenges and implementing solutions on different continents, showing a level of connection that defied conventional explanation. Lucy Thompson, now leading the center's global integration program, had documented cases of horses in Africa, Asia, and the Americas simultaneously developing identical solutions to local challenges, despite having no physical means of communication. Guardian didn't just teach them how to survive, Lucy realized. He awakened their ability to access what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, quantum entanglement on a biological scale. The implications for human understanding of consciousness and intelligence were staggering. The Guardian Center established the world's first quantum consciousness research institute, dedicated to understanding and learning from this unprecedented phenomenon. One morning, as the sun rose over Carter Valley, Jake witnessed something that brought tears to his eyes. A young horse, born into the latest generation of Guardian's lineage, was teaching a group of wild horses not just physical skills, but how to access this quantum field of shared consciousness. This is the true magnitude of Guardian's gift, Emily Rogers said softly, watching the scene unfold. He didn't just save a few foals or teach survival skills. He opened a door to a new level of existence, showing us that consciousness itself has no boundaries. The scientific community was transformed by these discoveries. Researchers found that Guardian's methods could be adapted to help other species access similar quantum capabilities. The implications for evolution and adaptation in a rapidly changing world were profound. Dr. Runningwolf, now in his final years, summarized it best. Guardian showed us that the next step in evolution isn't about physical adaptation. It's about expanding consciousness itself. As evening settled over Carter Valley, Jake watched the descendants of Guardian's original herd moving with a grace and awareness that seemed to transcend physical reality. They weren't just surviving or teaching, they were pioneering a new way of being, showing that the boundaries between individual consciousness and universal awareness were more permeable than anyone had imagined. The valley had become more than a sanctuary or research center. It was a gateway to understanding consciousness itself. Guardian's legacy had evolved from saving a few foals to showing humanity that the greatest frontier wasn't in space or technology, but in the expansion of consciousness and connection. You know what Guardian's ultimate lesson was? Jake said to a gathering of researchers and spiritual leaders who had come to study this phenomenon. That the true nature of existence isn't separation, it's connection. Every boundary we perceive is an illusion created by our limited understanding. As night fell over the valley, the stars seemed to pulse with new meaning. Guardian's influence continued to ripple outward, not just through genes or learned behaviors, but through the quantum field of consciousness itself, showing that wisdom, love, and understanding transcend all physical limitations. His legacy had become a bridge between science and spirit, showing that the deepest truths of existence lie not in separation, but in connection, not in competition, but in cooperation, not in limitation, but in the infinite possibilities that arise when consciousness expands beyond its perceived boundaries. The story of a mysterious black stallion who once stole foals to save them had become a key to understanding the very nature of consciousness and evolution. Guardian had shown that the greatest power lies not in physical strength or intellectual capability, but in the ability to access and share the universal field of consciousness that connects all life. The final rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant colors as Jake reflected on how a single act of compassion had led to a revolution in understanding that continued to expand beyond all imagined boundaries. Guardian's legacy lived on, not just in bodies or behaviors, but in the quantum field of shared consciousness that connected all life in ways science was only beginning to understand. The future, Jake said to the gathered wisdom seekers, belongs not to those who seek to separate and control, but to those who understand that true power lies in connection, in sharing, and in the expansion of consciousness itself. As darkness settled over Carter Valley, the horses moved like conscious waves through the quantum field of awareness, their very existence a testament to the infinite possibilities that arise when life evolves beyond perceived limitations. Guardian's influence continued to grow, not just across physical space and time, but through the limitless dimensions of consciousness itself. A new chapter in the evolution of life had begun, guided by the wisdom of a black stallion who had shown that the greatest journey isn't outward into space, but inward into the infinite field of consciousness that connects all existence. His legacy would continue to expand, touching lives and transforming understanding in ways that transcended all boundaries of species, space, and time. As the final rays of sunlight painted Carter Valley in golden hues, Jake Mitchell stood at the observation point one last time. At 85, his body might have aged, but his eyes still held the same wonder they had when he first encountered Guardian decades ago. The valley below him had transformed into something beyond his wildest dreams, a living testament to the power of one horse's vision. "It was never just about saving foals," he said softly to Sarah, who stood beside him, her silver hair catching the evening light. Guardian was showing us a path to something greater. The latest breakthrough at the Guardian Center had stunned the scientific community. Dr. Marina Rodriguez and her team had discovered that the quantum consciousness exhibited by Guardian's descendants wasn't limited to horses. It was beginning to manifest in other species that had prolonged contact with them. "The field is expanding," Dr. Chen explained, reviewing the data on her holographic display. "We're seeing evidence of quantum coherence in everything from birds to plants, in areas where Guardian's descendants have established themselves. It's as if they're acting as consciousness catalysts, awakening similar capabilities in other forms of life." The implications were profound. The valley had become an evolutionary accelerator, where species weren't just adapting physically, but developing enhanced consciousness and cognitive abilities. Wildlife that spent time in proximity to Guardian's herd began showing unprecedented levels of intelligence and cooperation. Lucy Thompson's latest research project had documented remarkable instances of cross-species problem-solving. A group of wolves, traditionally considered predators, had begun working cooperatively with horses to maintain ecological balance. They weren't just coexisting, they were actively collaborating to protect and nurture the valley's ecosystem. Guardian didn't just change horses, Lucy realized. He initiated a cascade of consciousness evolution that's still unfolding. We're watching the emergence of what you might call a conscious ecosystem, where every species contributes to a shared field of awareness and intelligence. The morning brought a stunning demonstration of this new reality. A massive storm system threatened the valley, but before any human instruments detected it, the entire ecosystem began responding in concert. Birds altered their migration patterns. Plants accelerated their seed dispersal, and Guardian's descendants coordinated the movement of various species to safe areas. They're not just reacting to the present, Dr. Whitman observed, monitoring the quantum field fluctuations. They're responding to future possibilities, accessing information through quantum channels that transcend linear time. The Guardian Center had attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Space agencies and terraforming projects sought to understand how Guardian's principles could be applied to establishing sustainable ecosystems on other worlds. The ability to create self-aware, cooperatively evolving environments had implications far beyond Earth. Jake watched as a young horse, part of the newest generation, demonstrated abilities that would have seemed impossible just years ago. The icy horse wasn't just communicating with other animals. It was facilitating the emergence of consciousness in the landscape itself, creating what scientists called biofield coherence zones, where accelerated evolution became possible. Guardian's gift wasn't just consciousness, Emily Rogers said, documenting the phenomenon. It was the ability to awaken consciousness in others. He showed us that evolution isn't just about survival, it's about the expansion of awareness itself. The implications for human understanding were transformative. The Guardian Center's research had led to new theories about the nature of consciousness, suggesting that awareness wasn't produced by the brain, but rather accessed through it. Like a radio, receiving a signal that existed independently of the receiver. One morning, as mist rose from the valley floor, Jake witnessed something extraordinary. A group of children from the center's educational program were sitting quietly with Guardian's descendants, engaged in what appeared to be direct consciousness exchange. The horses were teaching the children to access the quantum field, showing them how to expand their awareness beyond physical limitations. This is what Guardian was preparing us for, Sarah realized, watching the scene unfold. He wasn't just saving horses or teaching survival skills. He was showing us the next step in planetary evolution, the emergence of unified field consciousness. The scientific implications expanded beyond biology into physics and cosmology. Researchers discovered that the quantum coherence fields generated by Guardian's descendants matched patterns observed in deep space, suggesting connections between consciousness and the fundamental structure of the universe itself. As evening approached, Jake made his way down to the valley floor. One last time, the descendants of Guardian's original herd moved around him with graceful awareness, their consciousness interweaving with the quantum field of the valley itself. Each step they took seemed to ripple through multiple dimensions of reality, creating waves of positive change that extended far beyond the physical realm. Guardian showed us that consciousness isn't confined to individuals, Jake said to the gathered researchers and students. It's a field that connects all life, waiting to be accessed and expanded. He gave us the key to unlocking the next phase of planetary evolution. The valley had become more than a sanctuary or research center. It was a portal to understanding the very nature of existence itself. Guardian's legacy continued to unfold in ways that transcended all expectations, showing that the boundaries between species, between consciousness and matter, between past and future, were more fluid than anyone had imagined. As darkness settled over Carter Valley, the stars seemed to pulse with new significance. The quantum field generated by Guardian's work had created a bridge between Earth consciousness and cosmic awareness, suggesting possibilities that stretched far beyond our planet. "The future," Jake said softly, watching the horses move like living starlights through the quantum-enhanced valley, belongs not to those who seek to control evolution, but to those who understand that true power lies in awakening the consciousness that connects all existence. Guardian's legacy had become more than a story of rescue and transformation. It was a key to understanding humanity's role in the cosmic dance of evolving consciousness. His influence continued to expand, not just across Earth, but potentially throughout the universe, showing that the greatest journey wasn't measured in distance, but in the expansion of awareness itself. As Jake prepared to leave the valley for the last time, he felt a profound sense of completion. Guardian had shown them that every ending was really a beginning, that every limitation contained the seed of new possibilities, and that the greatest power lay not in changing the world through force, but in awakening the consciousness that allowed the world to transform itself. The story of a mysterious black stallion who once stole foals to save them had become a catalyst for planetary evolution, showing that the most profound changes begin not with grand gestures, but with simple acts of compassion that ripple outward through the quantum field of existence itself. As night fell over Carter Valley one last time, Jake smiled, knowing that Guardian's work would continue to unfold in ways beyond imagination, touching lives and transforming consciousness across space and time, showing that the greatest legacy isn't what we achieve for ourselves, but how we help all of existence evolve toward greater awareness and connection. As darkness settled over Carter Valley for the first time since Jake's passing, the Guardian Center hummed with an energy that transcended the physical realm. The quantum consciousness field that Guardian had awakened decades ago had evolved into something even its most ardent researchers hadn't anticipated. A bridge between dimensions of existence that science was only beginning to comprehend. Dr. Marina Rodriguez stood at the newly established Quantum Observatory, watching holographic displays that tracked consciousness waves rippling through the valley. Her mother, Elena's early work had laid the foundation, but what they were witnessing now exceeded all theoretical models. "The field is evolving," she explained to a group of international quantum physicists. "It's not just connecting different species anymore. It's creating doorways between different planes of reality." The latest generation of Guardian's descendants had developed abilities that defied conventional understanding. They weren't just communicating through quantum entanglement, they were actively manipulating the fabric of space-time itself, creating what researchers called consciousness corridors, paths through which information and awareness could flow unrestricted by physical limitations. Lucy Thompson's granddaughter Maya had documented the first breakthrough. A young mare from Guardian's bloodline had somehow accessed memories not just from her own lineage, but from parallel timelines, showing possible futures and alternative pasts that could guide present decisions. They're not just seeing these other realities, Maya explained, reviewing the data. They're learning from them, bringing back knowledge and adaptations that never evolved in our timeline, but could help address current challenges. The implications were staggering. The horses were effectively creating a library of possible solutions drawn from multiple dimensions of reality, sharing this wisdom not just with other horses, but with all species capable of accessing the quantum field. Sarah's final project before retiring had been to establish the multidimensional learning center where people could work directly with Guardian's descendants to expand their own consciousness beyond linear time and space. The results had transformed understanding of human potential. One morning, as the sun rose over the valley, something unprecedented occurred. A group of horses gathered at the quantum focal point Jake had discovered years ago. As researchers watched in amazement, they began a series of movements that seemed to bend the very light around them. They're not just accessing other dimensions, Dr. Chen realized, monitoring the quantum fluctuations. They're teaching others how to navigate them. This isn't just evolution. It's transcendence. The Guardian Center had become a nexus point for what scientists called conscious evolution, a process where awareness itself guided the development of new capabilities and understanding. Species that spent time in the valley began showing signs of accessing these higher dimensions of reality. Emily Rogers, in her final years, had developed a theory that Guardian's original mission, saving those foals, had been more than just an act of compassion. It had been the first step in awakening a potential that lay dormant in all life, the ability to transcend physical limitations through expanded consciousness. Guardian showed us that reality isn't fixed, she wrote in her last paper. It's a fluid field of possibilities, shaped by consciousness and connection. The boundaries we perceive are just the edges of our current understanding. The practical applications of these discoveries were revolutionary. The Guardian Center's research had led to breakthroughs in everything from environmental restoration to interstellar communication. The quantum consciousness field was proving to be the key to solving challenges that had seemed insurmountable. One afternoon, as storm clouds gathered over the valley, the horses demonstrated their most remarkable ability yet. Working in concert, they created what researchers called a probability matrix, a field where multiple possible futures could be examined and influenced through conscious intention. They're not just predicting the future, Dr. Whitman observed. They're actively participating in its creation, showing us how consciousness shapes reality at the quantum level. The implications for human evolution were profound. People who worked closely with Guardian's descendants began developing similar abilities, accessing multiple dimensions of awareness, understanding the quantum nature of reality, and participating consciously in the evolution of existence itself. As lightning illuminated the valley, Maya witnessed something that would have seemed impossible just years ago. A group of children, working with the horses, were learning to access what they called the wisdom field, a dimension of pure information and possibility that existed beyond space and time. This is the real gift Guardian left us, Maya realized. Not just the ability to transcend physical limitations, but to understand that consciousness itself is the fundamental force shaping reality. The valley had become more than a research center or sanctuary. It was a doorway to understanding the true nature of existence. Guardian's legacy had evolved from saving a few foals to showing all life how to access the infinite possibilities that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional reality. As night fell over Carter Valley, the quantum field pulsed with new potential. The horses moved like conscious waves through dimensions of reality that most humans were only beginning to perceive. Their every movement a lesson in the art of transcendence. "Guardian's work isn't finished," Marina said, watching the field fluctuations on her quantum displays. "It's only beginning. He showed us the door. Now we're learning how to walk through it." The story of a mysterious black stallion who stole foals to save them had become a key to understanding the very nature of reality itself. Guardian had shown that the greatest power isn't in physical action or even quantum connection. It's in the ability to consciously participate in the evolution of existence across all dimensions of reality. As the stars emerged over Carter Valley, their light seemed to carry new meaning. Guardian's influence continued to expand, not just across physical space or quantum fields, but through dimensions of existence that science was only beginning to comprehend, showing that every boundary was really a doorway to greater understanding. His legacy lived on in ways that transcended all expectations, proving that consciousness itself was the force that shaped reality, and that the greatest journey wasn't measured in distance or even in awareness, but in the endless exploration of what becomes possible when we dare to transcend our own limitations. The future that Guardian had glimpsed, that had driven him to take that first brave action of saving those foals, was finally emerging, a future where consciousness, connection, and endless possibility merged into a new understanding of what life could become when it dared to evolve beyond all boundaries. Half a century after Guardian first appeared at Pine Creek Ranch, his legacy culminated in an event that would forever change humanity's understanding of consciousness, evolution, and the nature of reality itself. The Guardian Center, now a sprawling complex of quantum research facilities and consciousness exploration centers, buzzed with anticipation as researchers prepared to witness something unprecedented. Maya Thompson, great-granddaughter of Sarah, stood at the center's most advanced quantum observatory, watching as the latest generation of Guardian's descendants gathered in a perfect circle at the heart of Carter Valley. These horses, carrying not just his genetic legacy, but his expanded consciousness, had developed abilities that transcended all known boundaries of physical existence. "They're ready," she said softly to Dr. Marina Rodriguez, who nodded as she monitored the quantum field readings. The displays showed patterns of energy and consciousness that pulsed with possibilities beyond ordinary comprehension. The morning had begun with a discovery that shook the foundations of physics and biology alike. The horses had somehow created what scientists termed a consciousness nexus, a point where multiple dimensions of reality intersected, allowing direct access to what some called the source field of existence itself. "This isn't just about communication or even quantum entanglement anymore," Dr. Chen explained to the gathered observers. "They're accessing the fundamental creative force of the universe, the field from which all reality emerges." As the sun reached its zenith, the horses began moving in synchronized patterns that seemed to bend both space and time. The quantum field readings exploded with activity as reality itself appeared to ripple and flow around them. But this wasn't just a display of their evolved abilities. They were preparing to share something profound. Young children from the center's integration program sat quietly among the horses, their minds already attuned to the expanded consciousness that Guardian's legacy had made possible. What happened next defied all expectations. The horses began, transmitting not just information or awareness, but direct access to what researchers called the unified field of creation, the source from which all possibilities emerged. Through their evolved consciousness, they were showing humanity how to access and work with the very forces that shaped reality. They're not just teaching us about consciousness, Maya realized, watching the children's faces light up with understanding. They're showing us how to participate consciously in the evolution of existence itself. The implications were revolutionary. The horses had discovered how to access and manipulate what quantum physicists had long theorized about: the zero-point field where all potential realities existed simultaneously. But more than that, they were teaching others how to access it too. Dr. Rodriguez's instruments captured something extraordinary. The horses were creating stable consciousness bridges between different dimensions of reality, allowing direct experience and understanding of possibilities that existed beyond ordinary perception. This is what Guardian was preparing us for. Emily Rogers' voice came from an old recording played during the event. He knew that consciousness wasn't just about awareness. It was about participating in the creative force of existence itself. The children working with the horses began showing remarkable abilities. They could perceive multiple timelines simultaneously, understand complex universal principles intuitively, and even influence probability fields to help manifest positive outcomes. They're not just accessing information, Dr. Whitman observed, his voice filled with wonder. They're learning to work with the fundamental creative forces of the universe. This is beyond evolution. It's conscious participation in the emergence of reality itself. As afternoon light painted the valley in golden hues, the horses demonstrated something even more extraordinary. Working in perfect harmony, they created what observers could only describe as a window into potential futures. Not just viewing them, but actively participating in selecting and manifesting the most beneficial possibilities. Guardian didn't just save those foals, Maya said, watching the display of consciousness mastery. He initiated a process that would show all life how to participate consciously in its own evolution. The Guardian Center had become more than a research facility. It was a doorway to understanding and working with the creative forces that shaped existence itself. The horses had shown that consciousness wasn't just about awareness or intelligence. It was about active participation in the emergence of reality. As evening approached, the quantum field reading showed something unprecedented. The horses had established what scientists called a permanent consciousness corridor, a stable connection to the creative source field that would allow ongoing access to higher dimensions of reality. "This is Guardian's final gift," Marina said, watching the field stabilize. "He's shown us how to access and work with the very forces that shape existence. This isn't just about evolution anymore. It's about conscious creation." The implications For humanity and all life on Earth were profound. The horses had demonstrated that consciousness itself was the key to working with the fundamental forces of reality, and that through expanded awareness, all beings could participate in the conscious evolution of existence. As night fell over Carter Valley, the stars seemed to pulse with new significance. The horses moved through dimensions of reality that most humans were only beginning to perceive, their every movement a lesson in the art of conscious creation. Guardian's legacy isn't just about saving lives or teaching survival, Maya reflected, watching the children work confidently with the quantum field. It's about showing all life how to participate consciously in the greatest adventure possible, the ongoing creation of reality itself. The story of a mysterious black stallion who once stole foals to save them had become a key to understanding and working with the very forces that shaped existence. Guardian had shown that the greatest power wasn't in physical action or even quantum connection. It was in the ability to consciously participate in the emergence of reality itself. As the quantum field pulsed with new possibilities, Guardian's influence continued to expand beyond all perceived limitations, showing that consciousness itself was the creative force behind all reality, and that every being had the potential to participate in its endless unfolding. His legacy lived on not just in genes or abilities, but in the fundamental understanding that consciousness was the key to working with the creative forces of existence, and that the greatest journey wasn't measured in distance or even awareness, but in the ongoing adventure of conscious participation in the emergence of reality itself. The future that Guardian had glimpsed, that had driven him to take that first brave action of saving those foals, had finally emerged, a future where consciousness, creativity, and endless possibility merged into a new understanding of what life could become when it dared to participate consciously in its own evolution. And so, as the stars shone down on Carter Valley, Guardian's legacy continued to unfold in ways that transcended all imagination, showing that every ending was really a beginning, and that the greatest adventure of all was the conscious participation in the endless emergence of new possibilities. The mysterious black stallion, who had once appeared in the night to save helpless foals, had initiated a transformation that would continue to expand and evolve, touching all of existence with the understanding that consciousness itself was the key to unlocking the infinite possibilities that lay within every moment of reality. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.